Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Navs Effect Podcast. I am your host, Naveen Ganglani. Before we get to this episode, first, I would like to thank everybody who tuned in to our last episode. I know it was our first episode in a while. It was kind of like a return episode and a fresh new change for some stuff that we want to implement moving forward. And I'd like to thank all of those who tuned in, replied, commented on YouTube, followed on Spotify, subscribed on YouTube, messaged on Messenger, Instagram, wherever. Thanks. I always love hearing the feedback and the thoughts about the podcast. That's what I love conversing about the most, to be honest with all of you. I won't be replying to some of your hate tweets and your hate messages when you're trying to be mean to players and whatnot. But if you like to give feedback about the podcast, now that I am interested to converse in. Now, this was a really fun episode because in addition to what I'm about to do now, I also had Paolo Perez of the Upperbox Podcast. He came on to discuss about the current FSAs issue in the NCAA. Should FSAs be allowed once again in the NCAA after seeing how poorly the NCAA teams performed against the UAP teams in the offseason tournaments, namely Pinoy Liga and Filoil? So that was a good discussion. That's coming up in the later half of this episode. But first, I would like to converse a little bit about what just transpired in the Filoil finals. The 17th Filoil Eco Oil Preseason Cup ended. The UP Fighting Maroons for the second straight season come out on the winning side, defeating De La Salle University also for the second straight season to take home the championship prize. What a victory for the UP Fighting Maroons. They went undefeated in the preseason. And by undefeated, I mean 10-0 in Filoil. They swept the elimination round against UAP teams. They won in the quarters against Mapua. They won in the semifinals. Let me remember correctly who they faced. But then in the finals, they beat DLSU. Now, they beat DLSU twice. DLSU, of course, was the team that defeated UP in last UAP's finals. In the semis, by the way, UP defeated FEU. So they defeated FEU twice as well. Dominant effort by UP. They also went 8-0 in Pinoy Liga before having to bow out of the tournament due to academics. So overall, in the games that they played, UP finished 18-0, which is incredible. I know people are going to say, "Oh, UP so talented, they recruited all these guys. They're supposed to go undefeated." Winning 18 straight games is still difficult, especially when you're going up against other quality teams like a LaSalle or like an FEU under Sean Chambers, or even that game against Ateneo. The Blue Eagles put up a solid fight against the Fighting Maroons. And UP going 18-0 is nothing to scoff at. It's an accomplishment. They should be proud of it. It does not guarantee a UAP title. We know this from last year that UP winning the Phil Oil doesn't mean that they're going to be UAP champions automatically, but it's still something that you can consider an accomplishment, especially when you go unblemished the rest of the way. By the way, UP joins LaSalle as the only teams to win back-to-back Phil Oil crowns. Ironically, LaSalle did it the first 2 years of the Phil Oil tournament in the late 2000s. Now, this was an epic game. I won't lie. This game, when you just take the basketball of it into consideration, just the hoops, okay, not the magnitude of the game, the scale, the fans, whatnot, just the actual hoops. This might have been better than any of the games that both teams actually played in last UAP season. UP was down 20, 43 to 23 at halftime. They were outscored 29 to 6 in the second quarter. They shot just 2 out of 18 from downtown in the first half. LaSalle looked absolutely dominant. LaSalle was destroying UP. Really, it looked like a one-sided affair. It was even made more impressive by the fact that LaSalle, once again, without Michael Phillips, he didn't get to play because of an injury. I will not disclose the injury. That is a private matter, but it's not considered serious. He should be fine for the UAAP. In fact, I think maybe he gets to play even in the World University Basketball Series coming up in August. Josh David also out, not a major injury, but something he needs to recuperate from. And actually, Raven Cortez, who did play on Wednesday against UP, was recovering from a recent injury that he suffered just a few days ago. And so the fact that LaSalle was leading by 20 at halftime was very impressive. Now, from a betting angle, I was looking at the game odds that were online in some platforms. Entering the game, UP was a minus 6.5 favorite against DLSU in this contest. By the time it was at halftime, I think UP was getting plus 14.5 on the spread. Now, when it comes to money line, If you bet UP to win the game straight up money line at halftime, you would have won times nine of your money. So if you had an extra 1K around that you just wanted to take a chance and be like, okay, maybe UP comes back and wins this game, you'd be like 9,000, 10,000 pesos richer at this point. It's crazy. But I don't want to get too much into detail about that part, although it is interesting now that we're seeing some spreads for college games on platforms. Whether or not that's a good thing, I will leave that up to you. Let us know in the comments. And of course, while you're here, make sure to follow me on my other social media platforms as well for all the coverage I do. Now, going back to the game, I took down some notes. I brought my notebook. Arena was packed. There was nowhere to sit. I swear it felt so damn hot because of the weather outside in Manila today. I was hoping it would rain so it would be a little bit breezy, but no, it was humid, it was packed, but the action in the court was even more intense. But I still took down my notes because I wanted to really take everything in, write down what was going through my mind, and talk about it on this podcast. So I'm not going to go in some necessary order here. I'm just going to go based on what I wrote down and sound off in the comments what you think. Now, number one, with Henry Agunane and Michael Phillips for DLSU in the UAP season down the line this year, LaSalle is going to have 40 minutes of insanely good rim protection. Agunane's improvement from when he started playing for LaSalle in the Pinoy Liga Next Man Cup towards the end of last year and early this year compared to where he is now, it's night and day. Trust me. Quicker on his feet, catches better with his hands, doesn't shuffle his feet so much. Timing on defense is good. Knows when to go for the block. Knows when to go for the contest. Knows when to leave his man to send help defense. And Michael Phillips, these are qualities he's already great at. We saw it in the last UAP finals when he gave Malik Diouf some foul trouble issues in the first two games before Malik played great in the third game. But between Agunane and Phillips, when he does return, LaSalle is going to have insanely good rim protection. I think they will be at least one of the top two teams on defense next UAP season because of this. And it's going to be very hard to score on them. And we saw it when jump shots aren't falling, especially against this team. And it's hard to challenge them at the rim because of all that size. And then take note, they still have KQ providing help side defense as well. And KQ's a pretty big guy. Policarpio, and he's got his rhythm, can also be a factor on defense. Raven Cortez is an underrated shot blocker. We'll see what Alex Konov does when he joins DLSU. But yes, between Agonana and Phillips, just it's going to be superb defense for DLSU. It's going to be very hard to score against them in the paint, at the rim. Agonana and Phillips, top-notch shot blockers, and they can keep the ball alive even after blocking after blocking it, keeping the play alive rather than letting it go out of bounds. They're both great at crashing the boards. Also, expect LaSalle to be one of the better second chance scoring teams in the UAP next season coming up. And just take note, LaSalle won the championship last season with Bright Nwanko as the FSA. And Bright Nwanko is decent. I think Henry Agudane at this point is better than Bright. So LaSalle is getting better in that department. Point number two, CJ Austria. He is quite important to this team. We saw that in this game in the first half where he was targeting Jacob Baila. Once Jacob Baila entered the game, CJ Austria wanted that matchup, would attack him, scored a few times, hit a three-pointer as well. And the last time I saw CJ really do this was in the finals, game two, when he was targeting CJ Cancino on defense in LaSalle's victory against UP. And I believe this is a card that Topex Robinson has when he coaches DLSU, where what if he sees a potential weak link on the defense on the opposing team, CJ, who you could say is one of the better slashers for DLSU, CJ is going to try to attack that guy, and they need those attacks sometimes. Speaking of DLSU, especially if KQ is off, KQ is 6 out of 25 in this game. Let me pull up the stats real quick here. This is UP stats. Now here's DLSU stats. As you can see, KQ was 6 out of 25 from the field, including 1 out of 8 from downtown. Did have 10 rebounds, only 2 assists, -2 overall. He was still probably the best player on the court for DLSU, but more on why he struggled from the field later. But yes, Austria important. Austria also brings that toughness to DLSU, and I know a lot of fans of other teams will scoff at that, saying that maybe he's a dirty player, maybe he likes just getting a little too physical. But every team needs that. Every team needs a tough physical guy who will up the intensity and aggression a little bit in other ways to change the momentum and tune of the game. And CJ's that guy for DLSU. I know scoring wise, he might not always be the most consistent player, but overall, he's important to this team. He's significant. And his layup package seems like it's improved. At least for this game, it did. So let's see if that can continue moving forward. Number three, KQ in the post can be a cheat code against the right matchup. We saw it in the first half. DLSU really started to pull away and build that 20-point lead when they went to KQ repeatedly against Alarcon in the post. What happened? KQ hook shot, KQ jump shot, KQ jump shot again. Before you know it, the lead was 15 points. And with KQ in the post, you can create so many things too. You can kick it out to open shooters. It's a matchup nightmare because he can shoot against defenders he's taller against. If he's being defended by someone bigger than him, then he can use his speed to maneuver past him. If he's being defended by someone also smaller than him, he can back him down. And he's become such a reliable pull-up shooter, speaking of KQ, that can be considered a good shot. Now, even if he does struggle, like today, he did struggle, well, it's still most of the time a good shot, depending on the matchup. And it brings me to my next point here, where in the first half, you could probably say Coach Gold was playing a little bit of a Houdini trick here. Put Alarcon on KQ most of the first half. KQ scoring at will helped DLSU build that huge lead. Second half, Alarcon doesn't play much. What does Gold do? He puts Lopez and Torculias, two guys who are longer and more athletic, to guard KQ. What does that do? One, ball denial. Even if LaSalle does get the ball to KQ, a lot of times it was late in the shot clock and he had to make something out of nothing rather than knowing he had a lot of time to work with, maybe navigate the floor a little bit. Suddenly he's in go mode. Okay, I have to go and score because baka shot clock violation. I thought Lopez did a better job contesting KQ using his athleticism and size and speed and length. KQ's shot had to have a little more arc in the second half compared to what it was in the first half. And I think that was a huge reason why he's struggling from the field in the second half. He did have that big 3-pointer in late in the fourth quarter to get LaSalle back in the game, but he also missed a few shots that could have tied the game, sent it to overtime. And I felt that the defense of Lopez and a little bit of Terculias was a reason why. Overall, though, KQ still a matchup nightmare to me. Still the best player in college basketball today. And 6 out of 25 won't happen regularly. Trust me. UP, I don't want to say they got a break today because UP earned that victory. But the next time they face LaSalle, I feel like KQ will be a little bit better. Okay, number four here. So the halftime lead, 43-23. It felt like a statement from DLSU at that point because physically they were imposing themselves. UP was going mano and mano a lot, the players, a lot of rush jump shots, a lot of ill advised shots, I should say, also, and lack of aggression, which you don't often see from a UP team. But I felt that the physicality of Agunane and Kiambao and even Andre Dungo playing really well. I thought Andre Dungo played pretty impressive today. That physicality was really present in the first half, especially with Agunane. He was really defending the rim so well, crashing the glass, getting put back opportunities. And UP started to only match that aggression, that physicality in the second half after the break. They actually started the third quarter in a 10-0 run. And by then it was like, okay, it's game time. They're going to get back in this game. And everyone who plays at plus 10, plus 11 bet at halftime, well, probably had the feeling they were going to win that wager. And you don't really see this, but the UP crowd seems silent at halftime. I mean, obviously it's a 20-point deficit. It doesn't happen usually to the Fighting Maroons. The crowd was kind of like, I guess, trying to figure out how to take it because they had gone undefeated up to that point, and suddenly they were on the receiving end of a one-sided affair, which they were usually the ones handing out. But of course, the Fighting Maroons came back, and before you knew it, the crowd was back alive. And the ability of the crowd to go from 0 to 100 in an instant, it's still one of the most impressive things about UAP fandom nowadays. 3-point shooting is going to be critical to UP's success this season. And the reason why that is because I feel that this UP team, they don't have that Richie, they don't really have that Carl Tamayo, Xavier Lucero. And by that, I mean that big, lengthy, athletic slasher who can get to the rim, get to the free throw line, and get baskets. They do have Francis Lopez. He might be the only guy in the team right now until Jacob Bida develops his game more into the Philippine style of play. We'll see if that happens by this season. And Torcules to some degree, but we saw when Torcules isn't shooting so well, it can be problematic. And I feel like teams still try to sag off a little bit, give him the 3-point shot, prove that he can make it. But guys like Carl and Xavier couldn't really take that risk, right? And that's why you're seeing a lot of jump shots for UP Raylan Torres, Jerry Abadiano, JD Kagulangan. And if those shots are going in like they were going in the second half, UP is so deadly because then they can set up their defense. They can pressure the ball handler, lead to turnovers, use those athletes to finish on the break. But we saw a tale of two halves on Wednesday. First half, UP struggled to shoot. I think they went 2 out of 18, like I said, from the field. Overall, not such a great shooting performance from the Fighting Maroons still. Um, 6 out of 24 from deep, if I'm reading that correctly, yes. But those extra shots in the third quarter opened the floodgates and allowed them to get back in the game. DLSU, by the way, not exactly a great shooting night, just 2 3-pointers made. One of the issues they have to work on. But yes, UP's 3-point shooting, I think, will be very critical to how far they can get this UAP season. And it's important that they get those good shot attempts from deep off quality ball movement, which they were doing a lot more in the second half. Harold Alarcon, another shooter I should mention, he did hit that big 3-pointer in the second half. And if they pass the ball around and the ball has rhythm and flow, then a lot of times they get great looks from deep because they have great shooters and great movement. But a lot of times when it's guys trying to go one on one or trying to create something out of nothing, that's when the offense stalls down a bit. And that's maybe one of the rare opportunities where you can attack UP and maybe build a lead against them, like LaSalle did in the first half. Okay, number 6 in my points. I'm at number 6 already. DLSU miss Evanelli. This has been the factor. This has been the main question for DLSU this offseason. With Nelly gone, with Josh David naturally being a 2 and then being injured, who's going to take the point guard spot? Who's going to calm things down when things get a little crazy? Last season, that was Evan. He knew when to slow the pace down. He knew when to rush the pace. He knew when he needed to take a jumper, when LaSalle badly needed the basket. He knew when to set up the right teammate who hadn't gotten the ball for a while to keep him motivated. The little things, Evan was so damn good at the little things. So damn good. He knew when to get a timely steal. A lot of people criticize Evan for what he couldn't do for the longest time until they saw what he was able to do when it all came together in that final season. And LaSalle still struggles to some degree with that regard. Now, KQ can play some point. He's a great ball handler as well. But there are times when KQ is better as the guy being set up by a playmaker so he can look to score nearer to the rim. And then there are times where without someone like Evan, LaSalle is relying on their other players to bring the ball down. And it's not bad actually. Like there are guys like Makalala who can bring the ball down. Duma has proven to be a quality ball handler. Even Leon Ramiro, more on him later. I want to discuss him more later. But he is also a solid player, but not yet at the level that Evan was last season for DLSU. That was extreme. After KQ, Evan was probably the second most important player in that series against UP. Um, DLSU will have to develop that in their upcoming off-season trips, more of their off-season games to get them prepared for the season. Now, there are promising signs from Ramiro. Like I said, I will discuss more of that later. But yes, those turnovers were costly in the third period, allowing UP to get back in the game. And it's something to work on. LaSalle is far from a finished product. There are a few months more to develop. That's one of the areas they will have to work on. Who takes control? Who just knows which intangible buttons to press when things aren't going so well? Next point. Jerry Abadiano might have the best pull-up game in college basketball right now. Um, his mid-range jumpers are elite. I know the stats show that he was 5 out of 15, but trust me, the shots he was making in the second half. Each one was at the perfect time, and he was making tough pull up jump shots, mid range off the dribble, spot up 3-point shots. He had the nice turnaround in the baseline in the third period, too. And he's become such a good mid range shooter since last season. I think this UAP season, you have the chance to see Jerry maybe become one of the premier scorers in the league, especially with JD Kagulangan still there setting him up. And I think there's going to be a game where he scores near 30 points. I've mentioned this story before, but from all the NU bullpup players that made UP want to recruit these guys to join their college team, it was actually Jerry in a tune-up game between a UP team from 2020 early 2020 against the NU Bullpups. Abadiano had 30 points in that UNAP game as a high school standout. So back then he was already a scoring dynamo, and he's starting to become that again in the college level. And today he just stepped up. He was the finals MVP. It was well deserved. I felt he was the most impactful player on the court for the UP Maroons, and I feel like we're about to see a huge season from Abadiano in season 87, and he's going to be a delight to watch. Next point, Leon Ramiro. Okay, early returns when he first just got to the Philippines, not amazing and not bad, somewhere in the middle, right? But we have to take note, this guy barely practiced with DLSU. A day or two after he arrived in Manila, he was already playing in one of their Filoil games and then playing in Pinoy Liga too. But you're starting to see the traits that made him an appealing one and done prospect. The perfect bridge for LaSalle. Not exactly perfect, but an ideal bridge for LaSalle after Nelly and before Cortez and Baclaan arrived. Cortez, by the way, the Pinoy Liga game, just awesome. Jacob Cortez is, I can't wait to see that guy play in the UAP. But Leon Ramiro, so yes, one season with DLSU, and today I felt he actually played decent. Overall, his stats, let's bring those stats back up. So Leon Ramiro started the game, 7 points, 3 of 9 shooting, not a great shooting display, but did have 5 rebounds and 6 assists, and only 1 turnover. So he did protect the ball well. And I felt he had 3 big plays in that second half that were important for DLSU. One, he had the instance where he was maneuvering in the pick and roll very, very well with Abadiano, a feisty guard, guarding him. He got Jerry up in the air on a pump fake, lured him into the pump fake. Actually, it wasn't by accident. He was dribbling, and then knew exactly when to go for the pump fake. Abadiano went up in the air. He got an open floater, made it. Later on in the fourth quarter, LaSalle badly needed the basket after I believe UP had gotten close to like a one possession game or maybe even took the lead. Ramiro, tough mid range jumper, made it. Later in the game, LaSalle is down. They badly need some points. Ramiro attacked Kingsley Ududo, got to the free throw line, made just 1 out of 2, but still badly needed play, and he was there. He will need to work a little bit still against pressure defense of ball handlers from other playmakers in the UAP, but there are promising signs there. And I think by the time he gets a few more months of development under Coach Topex under his belt, Ramiro is going to be a very important player for LaSalle, a very impressive player from LaSalle. And he just might be the solution to the point guard or the playmaking issues that this team currently has. Not saying he's a perfect solution, but he's definitely not going to add to the issues. And he could potentially be the answer. Time will tell. Of course, still a lot to improve on, but early signs starting to get better for Leon Ramiro. Okay, next point. Now, actually, before I get to my last point, I should say Kingsley Udodo, underrated player this offseason so far. He's been solid for UP. He's not Malik Diouf, but he's still pretty damn good. He's physical, attacks the boards. He knows when to time the putback opportunities. He had a huge putback shot that actually gave UP the lead again after Kimbao hit the three that put LaSalle up by 1 late in the game. Might have also been tapped by a LaSalle player, but Kingsley being there led to that basket. And after Agunan dominated that matchup in the first half, you saw Kingsley really perform better in the second half and make it more competitive. And I felt that was a huge factor in UP winning the game. So in terms of the FSA position, at least for this season, Kingsley, I think is going to do a stellar job, and he's going to be one of the better FSAs in the league. My last point: LaSalle and UP are starting to brew a very feisty rivalry. It's turning into a rivalry, a legit, entertaining rivalry where it's kind of bordering on both teams not exactly liking each other so much. That's not to say that the guys don't like each other. Off the court, they're friends. A lot of them know each other back from their grade school, high school days. But on the court, they're not holding anything back. And this has been actually building up for a while. So I'm going to draw a timeline here. This goes all the way back 2017, second year of Ben Mbala in DLSU. LaSalle's the defending champions. Mbala comes back to the lineup after missing the first 2 games. If I remember, he was playing for Cameroon in a FIBA Afrobasket tournament, and he was dominant, just absolutely dominant. And then, ironically, they lose to a UP team which didn't even have Bright Aqueti yet I remember Bright Aqueti was doing 1 year residency, but I believe UP still won that game with the Gomez Deliano brothers playing well. And that was the first time in a while UP actually won convincingly against Salle, and it was an upset. And that started getting the UP crowd excited. I felt that is where you can pinpoint where this rivalry started. Now, 2018, the year UP made the Final Four, they swept the elimination round against DLSU for the first time in ages at that point, including the second matchup, which ironically was the game where UP made it back to the Final Four for the first time in more than 20 years. They dominated LaSalle, blew them out at MOA Arena. Javi and one played stellar, and that just added more to the rivalry, right? 2019, UP sweeps DLSU once again. That first game, LaSalle had that victory secured in the bag at MOA Arena. And then they turned the ball over a few times. One GDL hits a game winning shot, and the UP crowd goes nuts. A few weeks later, they play in Antipolo. LaSalle UP down the stretch of a game. UP pulls it out. Once again, they sweep LaSalle the second straight season. Okay, pandemic happens. UAP comes back. 2022, season 84. UP sweeps LaSalle again in the elimination round. Two very tough matchups. Six straight wins for UP at this point against DLSU. The Final Four arrives. UP was coming off just beating Ateneo, being the first team to beat Ateneo in years. So they were coming off such a high. LaSalle wins that first Final Four game with a twice win disadvantage against UP. Suddenly, UP is facing the pressure cooker. Game two, LaSalle is up, I think, 14 points with 5 minutes left. And I think I started writing like a recap, to prepare for breaking. And then before I know it, UP comes back, steals the victory from DLSU. Another heartbreaker for the Green Archers. That was UAP season 84. And then, of course, ultimately, we see UP win the championship against Ateneo, but not before they were in an epic battle against DLSU, which added to the rivalry. Okay, UAP season 85. First game day of the season. UP beats LaSalle, comes from behind, gets the victory. And then triumphs over the Green Archers. Few weeks later, DLSU without Shawnee Winston ironically beats UP in the second round in a comeback victory of their own. And I think that may have costed UP the number one seed at the end of the season. Funny how things work out, huh? Okay, that was UAP season 85. Now we get to UAP season 86. Well, actually, before UAP season 86, Filoil. LaSalle beats UP in the elimination round. Few weeks later, Filoil finals. UP beats LaSalle. UP takes the Filoil championship. UAP season 86. We are here now, right? First round, LaSalle UP epic matchup again. MOA goes on the wire. LaSalle is up big early. No Evan Nelly, but still they're up big early, and then UP comes from behind with a massive third quarter run where I think they may have limited LaSalle to like 2 or 4 points for a certain stretch. At the end of the day, UP comes up with an escape dribble, kind of like a prevent play where they keep swinging the ball around. LaSalle's not able to foul them in time. UP gets the victory once again. At this point, it feels like UP has LaSalle's number. Second round, no Malik Diouf, yes, for UP, but still, that was a big, big, big victory for LaSalle. Beating UP in the second round, KQ, Policarpio were both awesome. A little bit of physicality between Policarpio and other contours the end of that game. People online know about that. And DLSU kind of, it felt like they flipped the switch against UP in the rivalry in that contest. All right. And in that contest, it felt like a finals preview to some degree. Lo and behold, a few weeks later, UAP finals, game one, UP destroys LaSalle, 30 points, largest margin of victory in the UAP finals, game one. Destroys them. And it feels like UP is on the way to a championship. A few days later, game two, UP up big, first quarter against DLSU. Fans are chanting Starbucks, the UP fans. You know why if you saw the DLSU Freedom Wall, right? DLSU comes from behind. Not only do they retake the lead, they end up blowing out UP the rest of that game too. And suddenly the series is tied. And once again, script is flipped. Then game three, UP up six. They might have even been up seven in the fourth quarter, near midway through the fourth quarter. Then eventually they're up five. Nelly hits a three. or up four. Nelly hits three. Kimbao hits a floater. LaSalle's defense prevails the rest of the way. LaSalle takes home the championship, defeats UP for the championship. And then this offseason, UP beats LaSalle in the opening of Filoil. UP comes back from 20 points down. Once again, another come from behind victory against LaSalle and takes home the Filoil crown a second straight year. Oh, and by the way, if UP didn't have to bow out of Pinoy Liga due to academics, maybe we could have gotten a UP LaSalle finals a few days ago in the Pinoy Liga finals, and then another one in Phil Oil a few days later. Now, I don't want to disrespect NU because they put up a great fight against LaSalle in the Pinoy Liga finals. But also, it is fair to wonder if UP did not bow out of the tournament, would they have defeated NU and then maybe been the one to face LaSalle in the finals? Probably. Imagine that within 3 days, two potential UP LaSalle finals. But anyway, I'm escaping the point here. Towards the end of the Phil Oil game on Wednesday, too, CJ Austria, Raylan Torres, a little bit of chippiness. Don't forget, game two. Joaquin Manuel, Raylan Torres, Evanelli had that chippiness as well. And the physicality between both teams, you're starting to feel it grow and grow and grow. And this has been a rivalry brewing behind the scenes, under the radar over the last few years, since 2017, really. And it's all coming to a head now. And I don't want to sound disrespectful to the six other UAP schools because we do know that in the UAP, anything can happen. Anything can happen. But what I took from that matchup today at Filoil is these two teams are headed for another collision course in the UAP finals at the end of this year. Assuming good health, assuming the roster stay the same, the additions come, I think there's another finals in store between these two teams, and I think it's going to be heated. I think it's going to be passionate. Listen, remember when the Ateneo UP finals matchup started, both sides were very friendly with each other. And then as they faced each other more, as both sides won against each other, that's when it became like a rivalry, like a heated rivalry. And I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen to LaSalle versus UP as well, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does because it's starting to grow into something that's, let's keep it simple. Familiarity sometimes breeds contempt, especially if you're competing against each other. And that's not to say that both sides hate each other, but definitely both sides want to win and prove a statement against each other whenever they play each other. And I think for the UAP, for the UAP storybooks down the line, for narratives, for storytelling, whatever you want to call it, it's great for the league because these are two incredible teams right now. And today's matchup proved why. All right, those were my thoughts from UP versus LaSalle. It sucks we're not going to get some decent college Well, not. I mean, there are going to be some tune-up games, but not televised. Not exactly to the scale of Filoil or Pinoy Liga. To June, so July, August, September. September 7th, scheduled opening for the UAAP. Of course, teams are going to have their off-season trips. LaSalle is going to Japan first week of August to compete in the WBS against championship programs from other countries. UP ironically is leaving for Serbia on Thursday, a day after winning Filoil. So imagine if they didn't pull off that comeback, how annoyed they may have been in that flight. And so now they might be in a better mindset. Things to work on, of course, but maybe a better mindset. LaSalle may or may not also be going to Korea. We'll see. I believe NU is also going to go to Korea at a certain point. I believe UST is also going to go to Korea in addition to some local places. And other teams right now, FEU I don't think has any out of country trips, but that might change. FEU, by the way, came in third place in Phil Oil. That's very impressive. That is a team to watch out for. If there's one team, sorry to go on a tangent here, but if there's one team you can expect suddenly become a legit contending program over the next few years, it's the FEU Tamras. So everybody's saying right now, the games, coaches, league sources, watch out for FEU. VJ Pred, John Ray Pasaol, the new guys they have coming in, the other guys who are in the high school ranks right now, but expected to also elevate in the college ranks in the future. Watch out for FEU. But yes, Salle and UP, they are leading the pack right now. I mentioned in the last episode with Nico that if UP beats LaSalle again, I would have to put UP as number one in my preseason rankings. And because that did happen, right now UP to me is my 1A, LaSalle is 1B. But The gap is very close between both teams, and in a three-game series, anything can happen once again. And then the rest follows: FU, UST, and U Ateneo. I think UE somewhat is there depending on how the new guys develop quickly. John Abate looks good. That's a good sign for the Red Warriors fans. And Adamson, a little bit on the outside looking in right now, but with Coach Nash, you can never count them out. Point is, I'm excited for college basketball. I wish it was September already, but until then, well, we'll just have to find other ways to keep ourselves occupied. Okay, for the second part of this podcast, it's an important discussion, and I hope you all stay tuned for that because I think it's worth the not only listening to the discussion but also reflecting on it ourselves and wondering, okay, is it time to make a change? And also, by the way, if you want to read a written recap of UP's victory against Salle, I wrote about it on All Star Magazine, new publication I write for now. I will put the link in the description box as well. Until then, catch y'all later. Let's take a break. Okay, we are now back here for the second part of the podcast where I feel like it's an important discussion to have, where I also bring on someone who is quite knowledgeable about this topic, has experience with this topic, and someone who, let's say, has passion in a league where this has kind of become a hot discussion as of late because of comments made by the big head coaches, the notable head coaches of this collegiate league. I'm talking about the NCAA. I'm talking about the discussion when it comes to allowing foreign student athletes to play in the NCAA. Can it improve quality of performance? Can it improve quality of competition? Can it make the NCAA a competitive force against the UAP in leagues like Pinoy Liga and Filoil once again? But more importantly, is it just what we're supposed to do as human beings to let these FSAs get the opportunity to play in the NCAA, get an education, to show what they're capable of, and at the same time, improve the capabilities of our local players? Joining me, even if it's late on Independence Day,
All
June
right.
12, 11 p.m., ironically, as you come in right now, Paolo.
Oh
Angel
man.
magic number. So, Paolo, just thanks for joining me. Even if it's late, thanks for joining me for what I think is an important discussion. I know you have some passionate thoughts about this topic in general, but I should say also that you do host a podcast of your own
Yes.
called the Upperbox Podcast. You're one half of the Upperbox Podcast. And correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, you have guests that are, well, quite notable with the San Beda Red Lions community, San Beda student athletes. But of course, you also have discussions about the UAP, NCAA, college sports in general. But again, thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. And you know what? I'm not going to delay any further. The floor is yours. Share. Go ahead. Let it rip. Let me know why or why not you are in favor of having FSAs back in the NCAA. Go.
Okay. So yeah. First off, thanks, Naz, for having me here. And first off, I would just like to preface this with the saying that, with the thought that I am not saying this because I am a Bedan. It's a common thing to say sa NCAA na just because I am a Bedan, I am pro FSA. No, actually, I would be still saying this even if I was a Letra Knight, a JRU guy, or wherever. This conversation has been going on since the time of Sam Ekwe, since the time of Sudan Daniel, that FSA should be banned because these people, or the FSAs, deny opportunities for local Filipino players. Yun yung lagi nila sinasabi. But for me, like, I've seen that era of FSAs, quality FSAs like Sudan Daniel, Ola Drogun. You know, truly believe that these San Beda teams, and just talking about San Beda muna, these players from San Beda would not be as good as they became if not for these players. So let's talk about it. look at the string of big men from the San Beda stable. You've had since from the time of Sam Ekwe to Donald Tanqua. You've had Jake Pascual, Dave Marcelo. You've had Kyle Pascual. And up to the latest part ngayon na kahit paano nakaranas sina Dami, JB Baguio, kahit paano naranasan nila na makapaglaro with foreign players. Their development, I feel, like, makikita mo yung quality ng players coming out of that position directly affects the fact na, uy, may mga foreign player, kasi you're not just thinking about the other guy. You're going up against this 6'8" person on a daily basis in practice. And I've heard so many players say that, even in our podcast. Jake Pascual said, ang laking bagay ng part ng development niya when he played against Ola, when he played against Su. Because you have to be more creative. Him being a 6'4" guy, a Filipino 6'4" guy, he's not used to going up against anybody. Like, it's rare for him to go up against anybody taller than him. So now he needs to step up. He needs to find more creative ways to produce. And at the same time, here's the thing. Does Baser Amer develop into becoming Baser Amer if not for Ola Jogun? You having more confidence in taking that three? You having more confidence in running a high-low play? Diba? And going into the wider league, that's why I super agree with what Coach Allen said when he said that, yes, so 1 and 2 spot, laban ng NCAA on overall scale. Pero 3, 4, 5, hirap. Why? Because you're forcing 6'3" men who have a height of 6'3", to play the 5 position, bro. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Dun sa aspeto na yon, are we really preparing them for a professional career if we're developing them that way? Aminin natin, 6'3" for a big man? No. Come on. You have to be serious about it. Like, if we're really serious about developing Filipino players, developing 6'3" big men is not the way. Kasi that's super undersized. So, for me, the reality is that FSAs provide something that is not an everyday thing in the Filipino in our society, na makakita ka ng 6'9", 6'8", 6'10". You can't get a Junmar Fajardo every day. That's why, he's super dominant. You can't get these guys like on an everyday thing. They're very rare. So, for me, on a basketball aspect, purely basketball lang muna, they're a need. And on another point, a lot of people call them mercenaries, call them all these things. I can't speak for the FSAs of other schools, but the FSAs that I've met in San Beda, especially Sudan Daniel, Ola Ajogun, Donald, some of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Ola was really invested in learning our culture. Hell, he even learned the language. He even learned the language and made an effort to try and learn our ways and our culture and create a life here. And of course, the late great Susan Daniel, he tried that too. They wanted to invest back in Philippine basketball, and they wanted to stay here and live here as Filipinos. So for me, I think it's such a sweeping argument yung sabihin agad na mercenary and all that. A lot of these kids, they come from very similar situations to a lot of Filipino ballers. They come from poor families trying to get an education. And if they get money, it's an open secret naman Meron naman talagang ganun Pero here's my thing. Why do we raise such an eyebrow for Africa, or for Phil foreigners playing for these colleges and getting an allowance? Pero we don't raise that kind of eyebrow when it's Filipinos. Di ba? At the end of the day, may direct effect, positive effect sa way of playing and way of even I would say even coaching sa pag-allow sa kanila. And my frustration with the NCAA has always been like with that decision of banning the FSAs. Yes, they achieved somewhat their goal of leveling the playing field, but at the sacrifice of really lowering the competition.
I
And
agree.
honestly, I've always felt this too, even as a student. The FSA issue isn't the real issue here. Why back then San Beda was dominant. The issue then has always been about budget. It's always been about the support. Who were the three dominant schools back then? It was Baste, it was us, it was Letran, and whoever you put in there. It was the fourth one was inconsistent. Those three schools are well funded back then, and now if you look at it, who are the schools that are well funded and are competing? Mapua has a collective right now. Well, still starting, but it's there. They have a backing somewhat of the Gokuways, and then San Beda, of course, SGA with Letran. So the FSA is a non-issue in my opinion. In fact, holding them back created a new issue. Na we can see right now na hirap ang NCAA sa UAAP teams. And for siguro for now my last point. Look at the quality of big men that we have produced, the NCAA has produced since banning the FSAs. The last is Justin Arana. And he's undersized. He's great. I'm not saying he's not great. But he's undersized and he hasn't gotten a call up to the national team. Who gets the call up? It's the guys from the UAP or the foreign guys. Kasi sila yung sanay sa banggaan. Yun yung nakita ko. The last great NCAA big was who? Raymond Almazan. And he played against Ola. And he himself credited his experience with playing with FSAs in his development. So, purely basketball lang, I'm not even gonna go muna into the race thing. It just makes sense to lift the FSA ban and allow for Philippine basketball to develop, and at the same time give opportunities to players and students to play and study and improve their lives. Isn't that the main idea of collegiate sports?
Mm-hmm.
So is it just because they're foreign? Yun ba yung hinahadlang natin? I don't think so. Kasi why would it matter if, let's say, Ola Jogan was actually really Filipino, but he was that dominant? Or Sam Ekwe was actually Filipino. Would anybody raise a stink? No. It's just the
Right.
fact that they're foreign. So for me, the ban has really negatively impacted the league, and we are seeing this from the cross competition between the NCAA and the UAAP.
Exactly. I
So
don't think it was an incident that the Filoil tournament this season separated the UAAP and the NCAA into different conferences slash groups where they would only go up against each other, and you'd only see cross battles come the playoff time, because we saw it in Pinoy Liga where the UAAP teams were flat out just destroying the NCAA teams. I'm trying to remember correctly, but I believe the record recently, I'm not sure exactly the context, but the UAP had defeated NCAA teams, 8 times to 2. The ratio was something similar like that. And I think that's in large part because of the fact that the NCAA doesn't have FSAs. Now, I want to bring up a screenshot that I brought up earlier. This is actually an article from Tiebreaker Times. I am going to post the link to that article in the description box. This was written by Luis Licas, a very well written piece, I should say. Now, this article goes beyond just the FSA impact in the NCAA. It also includes recruitment dynamics, grassroots program development, and much more. So it's a great article. I suggest people go read it. But I wanted to highlight this part in particular, where the Red Lions were crowned as Filoil champs in 15, 17, and 19, where they won against LaSalle each time. And now look at the quotes by some of the head coaches that we have coaching premier programs in the NCAA right now, like Yuri Escueta, Charles Chu, and Alan Ricardo, back-to-back NCAA juniors champion. And if you read between the lines, they're kind of saying that, yes, the competition, the quality of play, it's better with the FSAs there. Now, top to mind, what comes out right away when I think, okay, why should there be FSAs in the NCAA? One, developmental of the local basketball
Mhm.
players. The argument is having FSAs is actually going to hurt the local players because it takes away a spot. First of all, it takes away one out of 15 spots. It used to be two in the UAP. We already took away one. And now we're only asking for one for the FSA, and the NCAA still thinks this will take away from local players and opportunities. But
Exactly.
actually, that's the opposite of that, because we now live at a time where basketball is as positionless as it has ever been. What do I mean by that? It means that sometimes you have the big men now, instead of running to the post, actually going out to the 3 point line, playing the role of a playmaker, creating for guards and forwards. And because of that, no matter what your position is, it comes down to skill development. Can you
Hmm.
shoot? Can
Hmm.
you handle? Can you defend? Can you post up when required? Can you make the mid range jumper? Right? But if you're in the NCAA, you're 6'3" or 6'4". Like, let's say you're like a Bismarck Lina. Suddenly you have to play more of a big man. You have to be a
Exactly.
traditional five. You have to play with your back to the basket. You have to crash the offensive glass. You should get your rebounds, and you should do what big men do, because you're in a league where, due to your height, not exactly, something that's supposed to be taken against you, but because of the circumstances, you have to play as a big man, right? And then by the time you get to the pros, other guys 6'4", like let's say Alex Konov when he eventually becomes a pro, or
Hmm.
like a Kevin Kiambao. These guys are handling the ball like guards because they've been trained to do so, playing
Hmm.
in a league with FSAs, and that puts the local players, actually at a disadvantage. Two, you're right, this gives an opportunity for these FSAs to earn an education, to build a livelihood. I have seen Ola Diogan many times outside of the basketball court. I have seen him get a job here, play a role in some marketing, and just become like a member of society, which is awesome and wouldn't have been possible if San Beda didn't give him the chance to become a solid basketball player, to be recruited. Now, yes, there are some racist parts to it that should be discussed. We have heard the comments at the arenas of games, we've seen the articles, and that's another area that definitely needs improvement, definitely needs fixing as well. But overall, I think it would be very helpful for the NCAA to have these FSAs back, to prepare them for the pro life, talking about the locals, maybe international opportunities, and also just to become a competitive league. I mean, recently, the big prize in the college off-season recruitment game was Alex Konov, who ended up committing to DLSU. Now, San Beda actually got in that recruitment meeting list with Konov, and San Beda made a great, great, great impression. Jude Roque, the team manager of San Beda, when he wants to be a solid recruiter, trust me, he can be one. However, Alex ultimately didn't get enticed by the thought of becoming the face of the NCAA, or becoming, you know, this San Beda superstar who can compete for a championship every season. Why? Because he doesn't want to play as a big man in the college ranks. He wants to be a shooting guard, or a small forward, or a small ball power forward. And chances are, if you're playing in San Beda, there will be a time, even if your coaches don't intend to, you might have to be the five man, maybe because of foul situation, maybe because of game situation. And he didn't want that. And because of that, San Beda wasn't really in the final list. Quality of play. Over the years in the UAP, think of the FSAs we've had. Angelo Kwame, Malik Diouf, Henry Agunane, who's now at DLSU, Omar John, who's with NU. And over the years, we can go on and on. Ben Mbala. I mean, come on, right? And we imagine a world where we never got to witness that incredible dunk that Ben Mbala had in that game against Ateneo. That would be so sad. as a college basketball fan, as a college basketball aficionado, because that just showed how much the game was elevating, literally and figuratively. And I wish the NCAA could have something like that again. And more importantly, I still think there could be a future where we have the NCAA teams compete against the UAP teams in a proper league. Now, is that Filoil? Is that Pinoy Liga? Right now, that's the closest we have. But truth of the matter is, it's not a competition right now. It's not. That's why credit to Letran for keeping it close with FEU earlier. Credit to Letran for defeating UE the other day. But in terms of taking on the powerhouse teams like UP, like LaSalle, Ateneo when they're contending, it's just not there the competition level because of the FSA factor, because of the rebounding, the interior presence. And I miss those days. I miss those days where a San Beda LaSalle match and Filoil in the finals would be electric because the two teams would be even. We had a semifinal matchup, or was it a quarterfinal matchup? A quarterfinal or a semifinal matchup between San Beda and LaSalle recently. I think it was the quarterfinals, and it was not a contest. And even in the semis, LaSalle destroyed Latran. It was not, well, didn't destroy. Latran made a really inspiring comeback, but LaSalle led huge at one point, in part because of their height advantage. So one day I do hope to see we have FSAs back in the NCAA, because just in terms of entertainment value and quality of competition, it
Right.
can just make the league so much better.
Exactly. Imagine a world where Robert Bolick never had that comeback game against LaSalle. Imagine a world where he wasn't able to do that. Diba? That to me actually is one of the benchmark moments of San Beda, of his career in San Beda. And San Beda it's one of the big San Beda moments in the last 10 years. You know, yung comeback game niya versus Lasal and Filoil. To piggyback lang din sa sinabi mo, Naveen, with regards to the racism part, it needs to be addressed. It really does. I have seen horrendous stuff. Not just in the comment section, no. I've heard horrendous stuff in the games. I have heard foul stuff. So, for me, that needs to be addressed. Kasi, hindi pwedeng ganun. We are a people of color din. And at the same time, the recruitment wars, I'm not even talking about kasi I believe that some NCAA teams have a competitive budget, definitely. But some recruits are not even looking at the NCAA or any NCAA team just because the system that they run, the way that they play, won't fit them because they don't have a decent pick. Their idea of a decent pick is a 6'4", if they're lucky 6'5". Diba? So, what needs to be done, really, is the NCAA should really intently look at the voices of those who are calling for it, especially these three men. Because these three men, I really do believe, are the newest young voices and newest faces of Philippine college basketball. And it's very telling also that Alan Ricardo made that comment, especially coming from Letran. As if people don't know, Letran was one of those schools who pushed and voted for the banning of the FSAs. So definitely, this raises some questions as to whether there is a possibility that the ban will be lifted. Since this is Letran we're talking about.
Just to add quickly to that too, that
Uh,
Letran team coached by Aldenayo beat San Beda with an FSA, even if Letran was
mhm,
playing as a local team. And
exactly.
that was memorable in large part because of that too. Like when I was covering that series, I remember I was like, wait, Letran's gonna beat San Beda without an FSA, and that just adds to the allure of their championship triumph, which is another reason why perhaps we should have FSAs. I mean, and now people are gonna say, okay, then you're countering yourself because you're saying it won't be fair between the UAP and the NCAA. Well, that's different because the UAP already gets the premier local talent to go to their schools to begin with anyway, and then you're gonna add FSA spa. Then it really becomes a talent imbalance. But if you're just talking about the NCAA and you have these moments where a local team might be the team with an FSA, just adds to the storyline and the narrative and the
Exactly.
excitement. And if another team can't recruit or develop that local firepower to compete against the premier programs of the NCAA, then recruit an FSA of your own and make it competitive, right?
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't teach height. It's all about development. It's all about height. And yun na nga eh, this situation that we have right now in the league, it is obvious that there is a problem. It is obvious that there needs to be something done. And I really do hope that the management committee of the NCAA really reviews this rule kasi hindi ito nakakatulong sa Philippine basketball. It's not helping, and it's really holding a lot of players back and regressing us. So anyway, to basically to wrap this all up, I just want to call upon everyone to look at this objectively. We have been without foreign players since the end of the pandemic. Can you honestly say that any of these teams can be as competitive, any of the NCAA teams can really be as competitive as they need to be if they go up against an FSA led team? Not just, don't think of it just the FSA. Ah. Think of it on the overall scale, and not just think about the LaSalle. Don't think about the UP. Think about the other teams. Think about the UE, Adamson. Think about all of these teams that have an FSA and how their teams are made up. They are bigger, they move differently, they have a different system compared to the NCAA. I will always believe that NCAA provides exciting basketball and will always provide a great environment. But there needs to be something done for the good of Philippine basketball. Kasi this is a very glaring problem that we have right now. And I hope that we become more progressive about this issue and allow FSAs to play once again. And to the last point, then, if you look at other teams outside of the NCAA who have FSAs, look at CEU. They beat us because they had a great FSA and their players had confidence in taking those shots. Marcelo, all of these guys, Cruz, they beat us because their players had confidence. Honestly, in the NCAA, mahihirapan yung ibang team na talunin kami. Talunin ang San Beda. But they had the advantage of a great FSA and they had the confidence to take those shots and make it competitive, and they beat us. So, um, yeah, maybe something to ponder on.
Just to add to that point too, in Pinoy Liga as well, teams like Guangming College, Diliman College, Enderon have FSAs, and they defeated a lot of these NCAA squads. San Beda, if I'm not
Exactly.
mistaken, was eliminated in the quarterfinals of the Pinoy Liga tournament by, I believe it was Guangming College or Enderon, one of the two, in large part because of that large FSA presence in the team.
Exactly.
And ultimately, to me, my main goal is improve quality of competition, and I think FSAs do improve the quality of competition. FSAs also train your local players to get used to the international game in the PBA as well, where they will be going
Exactly.
up against imports in 2 out of 3 conferences usually. And overall, it just, to me, it just feels like the right thing to do. Paolo, thank you so much for joining me this evening, for sharing your thoughts. Why don't you
Thanks, Nats.
tell the listeners where they can find your podcast and listen more to what you and your partner have in store coming up?
So yeah, hi. Basically, we're the Upperbox Podcast, so we post a lot. Ngayon medyo on break lang kami, but we provide our thoughts and also guests with NCAA, UAP college players and alumni even, and get their thoughts and their stories out there. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on Spotify too. You can catch us every Sunday usually, but right now we're on a hiatus lang kasi pahinga muna kami. But yeah, we're excited to do some new things. We have some ideas coming in for the upcoming season. And preparations then for the upcoming season. So yeah, yun lang naman. So thanks Naveen for having me over here, and yeah, really happy to have this conversation finally in a bigger platform kasi um, nakakapagod na sa Facebook lang siya. It's better if it's an actual conversation that pushes the needle kasi it's a big problem and it's a big opportunity for the NCAA.
Absolutely. And thanks so much again for joining me, Paolo. This was a fun conversation. I hope it's not the last, even if it's not exactly in this space, but in other spaces too, because I
Yeah.
feel like the more discussion there is about it, the more, I wouldn't say uproar, but constructive criticism about how
Mm.
FSAs can actually help the NCAA, then the more maybe the league would consider potentially making the changes that could benefit the league, could benefit our local players, and could benefit these FSAs looking for new homes. And also, I like the fact that you noticed the shirt right away when we were
Of
like,
course.
in pre-production. Of course you did, right? So plus points to you for sure. Paolo, thanks so much. Everybody check out their podcast, the Upperbox Podcast, on Spotify and YouTube. I'm sure Paolo and his partner will eventually be on the show again in the future, especially with the NCAA season coming up. More to discuss. Thank you, man. More power to you guys.
Thanks. Shout out nga pala Danny, my partner. Hey, thanks man.